Good morning. Welcome back. Those of you that joined us yesterday, you kind of know what we're into. And we had some great people with us yesterday. We had Coach Petrino, who's the assistant coach with the Lady Broncos. And I thought that was a great presentation on how to build a team. Oh my gosh. And the Lady Broncos, by the way, if you haven't paid attention, have had phenomenal success for about, what, 2 decades now. So that was a great discussion. It was great to have him here. We got great people today. So those of you that are on live, thank you. Most of my family, I think, but hey, we'll take whoever's on. And if you're catching this on a replay, welcome too. Glad to have you here. So I'm Mark Wight, Idaho Estate Planning. We're sponsoring this. We've organized it. Carly Ward, who is my attorney junior. Does that work? She's really been a driving force in this, and want to thank her publicly. And I'm sure I'll have to thank her privately too, with maybe little cash, some time off, something like that. It will be worthwhile. However, so if you've been here, you know kind of the gig. If you haven't, just sit down, get your cocoa, get your coffee, and relax. Going to be some really good information today. Because this morning, to start off with, we have Eric and Lisa, Eric Collett from A Mind for All Seasons. And I'm going to let him explain that name. And then Lisa Hansen is with the Meridian Senior Center. And is that the full title? Because I'm seeing on the screen it says Center at the Park.
It is Center at the Park, Meridian Senior Center. It's both. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Very good. And if you haven't been there and you're a senior, you really should.
Yeah.
You're gonna explain that to us in just a minute. So hang on, we got some time together. I hear that we might lose Lisa towards the end. We'll mourn her loss and we'll move on. Eric and I have been known to do that. All right, so I want to turn the time over to Lisa for just a minute to introduce herself and tell us a little bit about Center at the Park.
Meridian Senior Center, Center at the Park. Either way, Center at the Park is more so of because we're an event venue as well. So that most people don't want to have their wedding at the Meridian Senior Center. They'd much rather have it at the center at the park.
Well, just so you know, the Old Man Band has played at the Senior Center.
Nice. As for the for our members or for an event?
Well, we had an event that was for members.
Okay.
And others. What was that? That was Alzheimer's Idaho.
Okay.
It was an Alzheimer's Idaho event, and we had people come, and I think we did a chili cook-off that year. And so that was a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's a nice.
Well, now you need to come back and
I
play again.
Yeah.
Yeah, you need to come back and play again. We have entertainment all the time.
And we're entertaining.
Okay. It's important.
So tell us a little bit about it and what you do.
Okay, so I'm the executive director of the Meridian Senior Center. We are a community center. We are not a place where people live. We're not an assisted living or anything like that. We are a community center for active older adults over 60. And what we
and adults that want to be active.
That's
and or should be.
There is that true. Yeah. So we'll take you at all ages because we are a community center. But yeah, so we offer so many things for our residents here in the Treasure Valley, Ada County, Canyon County. We're open. It's like, come and see us. We have over 1,200 members. We do activities. We serve lunch every day. We have entertainment every day. We have volunteer opportunities. it's just a really fun social place to be. Keeps you healthy, keeps you active, keeps your mind thinking, all with the different activities. Our activities calendar is full, and you can always go online and look at our activities calendar because there's so much going on there. As a nonprofit, we all of these things that we do as far as the activities and our events and dances and parties and all of those things are what just helps support our center. So we're constantly doing things. There's always adding new things. And I'll try anything once, I tell people. They can come to me and say, hey, Lisa, can we try this? Absolutely. Let's try it. Let's make it happen. Let's see if it works. We now have line dancing because somebody asked that, and it's taught by a professional line dancing instructor. Yeah. We have square dancing now. So our biggest and goal is for me is to have these people live younger so they'll live longer. That's what I want to see happen. And so I became the director August of last year, and I had a vision for the center. I've been there since 2017, and with the team that I have, they have just made this vision come to fruition. The center is flourishing. It's busy. We have about 110 to 130 people each day come and have lunch with us. And it's just amazing the things that are happening there. And if you haven't been to the center, I strongly recommend you at least come and check it out and see what all of the great things that we're doing there.
Now, couple of things. Congratulations, by the way. You've moved the membership, if you will, up to 1,200.
Yes.
That's a big jump.
Yeah, last year we ended at just over 700 members. And so each time I'm like, I want 1,000 members. I want 1,100 members. Now we're at 1,200. And the crazy thing is for us is that our membership is a calendar year. So it's from January to December. So usually you find people when they get into this October state, they're like, I'll wait till next year, right? And it's $20 a year. It's not a big cost, but they wait, and we understand that. So we offer right now, and since I'm on here, I can say this. For $25, we're offering people to get the rest of this year and all of next year. So if they sign up and they become a member, then we will let them get that. Yeah,
that's really expensive.
I know.
That's amazing.
So yeah, and because you're a member, you get extra benefits. So we have things like financial consulting. We have foot clinics. You get to know first about when we have all these trips, excursions, events, all that kind of stuff. You're the first one to know about those things because we have a mailing list, email list that goes out to everybody to say, hey, here's what's going on. So you do get extra benefits, I guess, for being a member. But anybody can come. You don't have to be a member.
Oh, very good. Very good. Now, you did not mention the fishing.
Yes, the fishing. If nobody has seen our building, again, I encourage you to go to our website, meridianseniorcenter.org. We sit in Kleiner Park, which is behind the village. If they don't know where Kleiner Park is in Meridian. And we sit right on this beautiful pond, and
they put fish.
They do. They stock it.
Yeah.
My husband, he serves on Fridays, and he always brings his fishing pole because he's like, why not? I'm here. Might as well throw it in. So yeah, there's fishing that you can do there as well. We just have so much for people to do. And dancing, everybody's into the dancing, and we love it. Watching them out there, it's so great to see the activity. Now, pre-COVID, I could tell you our demographic was probably closer to 75 to 88-ish. Now our demographic is sitting more closer to 68 to 79. So it has made a huge shift. Yeah. And these are people who are active, who want to get out. They want to go do things. I was saying earlier, we get what we call grand plants, which are those grandparents coming in with the transplants, and they don't know where to go, what to do. And so they're coming in and learning about our center and all of the things that we're offering them so that they can learn our city, because we take them out on outings. We do scenic tours. We take them to dinners. We take them to shows. I mean, we're constantly busy.
I'm exhausted.
You have no idea what the end of the day is like for me.
Have a notion. Do you go this hard the whole time? Because
Yeah.
man, that's a lot
I
of
do.
energy.
I
You've done a great job.
Thank you.
So thank you for being with us today. We're going to drill in a little bit.
Okay.
But we're going to let Eric talk about a mind for all seasons, and then kind of that's going to lead us into a discussion I think that you're going to come back into.
Sure.
So feel free to jump in.
Okay.
Unless we get like the stink eye or something.
Like I'm not answering that.
But no, we're glad to have you here. Eric, thank you. I know what this is like the one day of the entire month that you are in town.
Quite, but close.
Yeah, you travel all the time.
I do.
Yeah. So tell us why. What's going on?
Well, I have the privilege of speaking to groups all over the country about brain health related issues and leadership. And a lot of that is speaking to organizations that support skilled nursing and assisted living facilities, home health, personal care agencies. It is. And that's one side of what we do. You can think of a Mind for All Seasons as kind of an applied science research center where we're taking the latest in brain health related science and we're translating that into a process that helps people of all ages recover from or improve brain health related issues. So we're dealing with everything from Alzheimer's disease at the top end of things, or other neurodegenerative conditions like Lewy body dementia or frontotemporal degeneration, traumatic brain injuries. But we also help people with post-concussive disorder, attention deficits, anxiety, depression. And our youngest client right now is 8, and our oldest is a centenarian. So that's why it's called A Mind for All Seasons. We're helping people in every season of their life maintain their brain health by leveraging cutting edge research. So it's been an exciting ride to see that develop. We have collegiate and professional athletes as well as younger athletes that are part of the process that we use. We have business executives that are trying to maintain their mental crispness because we're in a knowledge economy and people aren't earning their living by brute force. So we want to protect the brain.
Except the NFL.
Many more people are realizing and learning that the direction of the current research is showing that you can improve brain health at any age, but it's particularly valuable to prevent things like Alzheimer's and other types of dementia. And a lot of the top researchers in the world now recognize Alzheimer's is largely preventable. It's a lifestyle kind of thing that develops years before you have problems. So that's,
first of all, it's a long process.
Yes.
With Alzheimer's. And you and I've talked, and it begins long before we start to, well, those of us that are not, trained, before we start to see some of those deficits. And so you're suggesting that if we can move back the effort to prevent it, we can at least delay it and maybe prevent it?
You can pretty consistently prevent it in most of those cases. There are so many different risk factors, and if you manage all of those, you cut your risk very dramatically. We should have a lot fewer cases of Alzheimer's disease than we do, and other conditions. 1 in 9 adults, 48 and older, feel like they have some sort of cognitive decline. They're not as crisp as they were a few years earlier. A lot of people complain of things like brain fog, and we deal with that all the time. We help people over those hurdles. One of the things that we've learned since you and I last talked, Mark, is that many people have a brain injury and they don't even know it.
Oh.
For example, suppose you're sitting in your car, minding your own business at a stoplight, and somebody's maybe texting and driving. That still happens occasionally. And let's suppose that somebody plows into the back of you going 10 miles an hour. Well, the brain doesn't just sit in the skull, it floats in the skull. And it doesn't take a lot of force, if that force is directed just right, to cause the brain to compress on itself, squeeze and damage the pituitary gland, and goof up signaling for about 35 very neurologically active hormones, most of which primary care doctors never check.
Well, they don't, because they one, don't know about it, and two, can they even? I mean, do they have the ability to check for that?
It's
If they
a simple
knew to
blood
do it.
test. But
well,
I have clients who are MDs themselves dealing with brain health related issues. And some of the hormones we've checked, they've said, why don't I know about that hormone? And well, that's like postdoctoral neuroendocrinology. And our medical director has done some advanced training in that. And we've done a lot of research with that with our clients. And what we've seen is that when someone has that experience getting rear-ended, they think they've got a little fender to get cleaned up. They've got some whiplash. They go to the chiropractor and they feel okay in the short run. But in about 40% of cases, there's a chronic inflammatory response that gets set off and hormonal signaling starts to degrade. And then 6 to 9 or 12 months down the road, someone out of the blue develops an anxiety disorder, or they have an eating disorder, or they have some other mental health problem. Some people become suicidal and they don't connect the two. They don't realize I had a brain injury and it's damaged the pituitary gland and my brain's on fire with this low level smoldering inflammatory response. And when we work with people like that, we see it in eye tracking tests, we see it in their balance, we see it in cognitive scores, we see it in blood work. And when we deal with those root cause issues and calm the inflammation and fix the hormones, in virtually every case we've seen so far, their cognitive functioning improves dramatically. People start sleeping again who've had sleeping disorders. Um, they experience real relief in their mental health symptoms. So it's been really a game changer to figure some of those pieces out and leverage research that was done largely with the military over about the last 30 years, studying out how do you help soldiers with PTSD and what constitutes a brain injury. And we've pulled that into our process and done a lot more applied research with it. And it's been exciting to see what's happened.
Oh, very good. So I'm hearing a couple of things. Let me see if I can throw this back a little bit. And I think it's something, one thing that I think we can all take from that is we never know what the person sitting across from us who's irritating, annoying, the neighbor, whatever, we never know what they're going through.
Absolutely.
So that would be helpful for us to go, well, wait a minute, we don't know. I mean, we finally kind of got an idea on the PTSD. There were some things going on, and I think we got a little gentler, a little kinder, a little more patient. Except in my neighborhood, from the 3rd through the 9th of July. They haven't gotten kinder or gentler. I have a dog that can explain that to you.
Oh boy.
So that would be one thing to take from this is, well, wait a minute. And Lisa, you probably see this. You've got those cranky old guys.
Yes.
She's laughing. I haven't been there in a long time. So
And you know what those cranky old guys are in your center? In most cases, it's a massive depletion of things like testosterone, which interestingly, women, if you compare in the same units of measure, women have more testosterone than estrogen. They just don't have nearly as much testosterone as men, but testosterone is critical for memory functioning. So are a lot of other hormones. And you take a guy that's in the first percentile for his testosterone level, he's cranky. He doesn't feel good and his brain isn't working as well as it should.
Okay.
Physical activity, the programs you have at the center to keep them engaged, that helps stimulate a little bit higher testosterone level. That's helpful.
And maybe they'll be a little nicer.
Yeah.
don't count on
It's single greatest things we can do for our brains. I'm a big fan of a multimodal approach. You got to hit a lot of risk factors. But if you had to pick one, exercise is one of the best things that you could possibly do for your brain. So all of the things you're doing at the center to keep our friends that are watching this engaged and to provide opportunities for them to be physically active, That's huge. And I mean, you can't get a gym membership for what you guys are charging. It's phenomenal. Everybody should be doing that.
$25 a month.
And it's funny because we do have those people that the transplants that have come in and that's what they say when we go, oh, it's $20. They're like, oh, a month? No, it's a year. And they're all seriously?
Well,
They
no,
can't believe it.
you should have tiered, membership. You're from California, that's 125. Because they still think that that's a bargain.
I know. It's great. Well, and even our center, when they say that, they say your center is even better than ours in California, and so they're even more so surprised that it's only $20 a year. But, really, again, our primary goal is just to give them all of these activities and things for them to do. And I do notice that some of those cranky old guys aren't as cranky as they used to be because their stimulation, they've got that socialization, they're participating in the different activities and things like that. So where they might have been a little bit cranky with me 6 to 7 months ago, they're not as cranky. They're still nice. They're getting nicer.
I think there's something that you're doing at the center that our audience probably misses and don't make the connection with about why it's so important to be involved in something like what you're doing, Lisa. People ask me all the time, hey, Eric, what value is there in doing brain exercises? Like, should I be doing crossword puzzles? Should I be doing
Sudoku?
Yeah.
Come on.
And what the research shows with those types of activities is that it's not necessarily brain training in that really you just carve the same pathway over and over. You get better at Sudoku, you get better at crossword puzzles, and there's nothing wrong with that. There's
value with friends.
Yes.
Although the gal that my mom used to play with, she cheated all the time. I don't know how you do that, but
what you need though, if you want to stimulate new neural connections, one of the best things you can do is to have new cognitive experiences, novel things you've not done before. So for example, there's a lot of research that shows complex movement patterns, like the dance that you have people do. When you are engaged in complex movement patterns and you have to learn something new like that, it stimulates the brain in very positive ways.
That's awesome.
Social experience where you're navigating new conversation is good. Learning a musical instrument, that stimulates a lot of stuff. So the old man band, you need to be playing more, Mark.
Well, no, I need to learn another instrument.
There you go.
Right?
There you go.
Yeah.
You've always wanted to play the harmonica, haven't you?
Yeah, but there are people close to me that are not so sure that I should play the harmonica.
Well, you can give them the alternate of the bagpipes, right?
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
I could totally see you with bagpipes.
That is a tactical war weapon. It scared the behoofles out of people as those Scots came over wearing skirts, right? And killing a cat, as they came up over the hill. And so people
So all you would do is the one time of the year is July 3rd through July 9th. You bring out the bagpipes
around the neighborhood.
See?
Oh my gosh.
You totally have it.
Well, but I was thinking you need a choir.
Yeah, we did have one pre-COVID and then it kind of disbanded. And we haven't talked about it, but I have my list of potential activities. We've had people, like I said, I'll try anything once. And so we put these together and then we see how can we make that work. But that's a great idea to bring that back and see. And I think I have a gal who might even spearhead that and do that.
Oh, very good.
Yeah, then now that you say that, I think I have somebody who I could probably get to do that. So yeah, I think a choir would be good. And I would also love to bring in somebody who does teach different musical instruments and just add that as an activity so that they can just come in and try things out. Now it might be a little when you've got everybody trying a new instrument at one time, but if they could learn a song and come together and then they can come and perform for everybody at lunch.
In the closet, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 recorders.
Oh, well, there you go.
Bring them down.
Little recorder ensemble.
Oh yeah, we had the recorder. Actually, I had a couple of the kids that got pretty decent at it.
I survived that in elementary school.
Yes.
Yeah. Did you survive it with your kids?
Barely. Between that and the early stages of viola playing with my two
Eekers.
daughters.
Yeah, my son called them eekers.
Oh my.
Area.
Oh my,
Yeah.
I could see that with the group. We sit there and go, there's, but I think that where you say, you try anything once, you should have grown up in Montana. That's all I'm saying. I'm gonna leave it right there. I could see a number of those folks trying something,
Okay.
going in there, and I think, and I don't know if this helps or not, they would laugh. I think there would be laughter.
Laughter releases some endorphins.
There you go.
Laughter's so healthy. Yeah,
That would be interesting. Yeah,
absolutely.
very
Yeah.
good.
Or maybe a bell choir. I started my career as a program director in an assisted living facility way back when. And one of the things that we did that was so effective was we hired a lady to do a bell choir with our residents. And so they would ring their bells and they had to follow along the
Yes.
music sheet.
Oh, yeah.
It was so effective, so stimulating, and they loved it. And we started performing for other groups, and
It's
it
interesting.
was really neat.
Again, I think I have somebody in mind. You probably all know her, Diana Colin.
Yes.
Yeah, she comes
Yeah,
in and
Diane's
performs for
awesome.
us a couple of times a month, but I'm wondering if she might, she's so busy, but yeah, I think that would be like I said, we'll put it on the list. I have a whole list of let's try these kinds of things. Now, our activities calendar is so full, I have a hard time finding where can I put
Very
this
good.
on the
Mhm.
calendar. And we have technically 4 spaces that we can use on a daily basis. And I am struggling to see where can I fit that in? How can I make that happen and make it work? So, but I usually do. Make it happen. That's what I say. We'll make it happen. So,
It sounds to me like they have the right person
oh, well, thank you.
out there at the Meridian Senior Center,
The park.
on the pond.
Yeah.
I love it. So Eric, again, looking at the senior center, it's not the only place for this, but they've got a lot going on. Nutrition is huge.
Oh,
So the fact that they're going and getting some food, because I know, people get to a certain age, it's not as easy. My mom, when she lived on her own, that was the hardest thing. Go buy the groceries, get them out to the car, bring them home, schlep them up the steps into the kitchen, put it away, and then prepare a meal. And then she never knew what to do with leftovers. So like, and every day, right?
Yeah. So Monday through Friday, we serve lunch at noon. We're very fortunate. We have a partnership with Metro Meals on Wheels. So they rent kitchen space. We have 2 kitchens in our in our dining area. One is for us and one is for Metro Meals on Wheels, and they put out our meals every day. We provide a menu to everybody so they know what's coming up. But also with Metro Meals on Wheels, give them a little plug. They put out, I think, 400 to 500 meals from that kitchen as well to the community from our kitchen. So so we're able to offer these meals to them, and it's a $4 suggested donation if you're over 60 and $6 if you're under. So totally affordable for them as well. So it's not a big cost for them. And we offer a lunch bus. So if we have people within our boundaries, which is some of Boise and mostly Meridian, we will go pick them up, bring them to the center so they can have lunch, and then we will take them home if they're homebound but independent enough to get on and off the bus and that kind of thing. So we'll provide that service for them as well.
So the activities, which I think is huge.
Yes.
Even the cranky old guys.
Yep.
There's the socialization. And then some nutrition, which they may or may not be getting at home, or not as good a nutrition one as they probably should. Eric, anything else that's going on out there that we should be looking at going, that's pretty good for the brain?
Well, we've talked about exercise as well.
So and exercise.
Let's not forget that. Socialization, you mentioned. Stress management is a big deal. And part of what causes stress for people is to not have meaningful connections with others in their lives. And the older we get, the more friends we have that kind of experience that uh, thing called death that we all go through. Number one cause of death is birth.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to happen. Life comes with a round trip ticket. And as we get older, that becomes increasingly difficult to deal with, and it's stressful. I think a lot of people don't realize how much stress they're under as their world shifts and changes. And having something like the center where there's a sense of routine, there's structure, but there's also novelty and there's new connections, I think is an incredible thing for helping manage stress for people. So I think that's a big deal.
And we try to offer those services as well, grief counseling, or have a grief support group in there. We have an Alzheimer's support group in there. We have a couple of different Bible studies that people can come to if they need, that type of outlet as well. So we're trying to bring those type of things in for them too, because you're right, they do need that. And they need to be able to talk to somebody on a common basis, is what are we struggling with, and how do we come together to kind of talk about those things.
My mother loved having the kids and the grandkids. She just loved it. And sometimes she didn't even need to talk. She just sat there while they were doing all this. But for her, in her community, one of the things I think that was huge for her, I don't know that she recognized it, but she said a few things, was the ability to connect with somebody with similar experiences. Mm-hmm. Which, as you age, your classmates drop out, mm-hmm. and it gets harder and harder then to have a conversation with somebody that's your age or right around your age and lost their spouse, or had to move, or physically not getting around as much. And I think that was huge for her. Mm-hmm. And so I could see that also at the senior center, is the ability to come and, complain together.
That's right. Well, there is that. Yeah, there is that. Well, and we found too that people who are new to the center are finding people who have been at the center for years. They have a common connection. Maybe they came from the same city.
Oh, yeah.
Maybe they're like, oh my gosh, you just moved here. I grew up here. And then they're making those connections, which is really nice too, because you're right. As they get older, friends aren't always around that were around before. And so now they're making those new friends and those new connections, but still familiar because they came from the same area. Mm-hmm. So they're really enjoying that too, being able to meet new people and new to them, but maybe from the same area. So it's kind of nice too.
So these connections, we should not overlook that.
Not at all. No, that's critical.
Yeah. I think some of this came bubbling to the top during the COVID. I'll call them the COVID wars.
Yeah.
That was a struggle for a lot of people. Mm-hmm. Isolation. We ended up buying Mom the Apple portal. We could put it right next to her, and she could call us. And she didn't need to hold her phone, which was getting harder and harder. It was harder for her to, punch the numbers. And so she could just, hey, portal, call, and she'd get us on. And I think that was huge. Mm-hmm. But I think we forget that. And so even the meals out to 400 or 500 people, maybe it's not just the dropping the meal off. It's a connection. Mm-hmm. And what should we be thinking, looking, what should we be doing, whether it's for a family member or it's the neighbor next door? Eric, what are some things?
I think it's important to be aware that socialization or lack thereof constitutes a potential risk factor for cognitive decline. There's plenty of research out there that shows if people have very limited or next to no social connections, they're at greater risk for cognitive decline for many different reasons. If you have a reason to get up in the morning, if you have a friend that you're going to go see, you have a more compelling reason to keep yourself hydrated and to feed yourself, and you're moving around more. There are a lot of things that I don't know if we can tease out all the details and how they work together, because brain health is affected by so many different factors. But they all matter. And something as simple as whether or not we're going to go visit a friend that day and interact can influence so many other downstream things.
We've had the experience in the law office where they came in, we're doing some work and we're trying to find a place, Bill's back there, Bill trying to find a place for them to come in and sign the documents. And they would go, well, no, that's the day I get my hair done. Oh, is that in the morning or in the afternoon? You don't understand. That's the day I get my hair done.
It's the whole day.
Okay, so we're not doing it on that day. Is there another day?
Yeah.
I found that fascinating, but I think that's, these are activities, and I don't know, maybe at a certain age, we, kind of hoard those activities. We go, oh, no, that's Tuesday. I get my hair done. And Thursday, I'm going to the senior center, or whatever it is. It just seems really interesting. More would be better.
Not necessarily. Sometimes there's a risk factor that families need to be aware of. If you have a loved one who seems overwhelmed by doing more than one thing, and they normally were a real go-getter, but just getting to the hair appointment is stretching them to the limit.
Right.
That's one of those red flags that should cause people to recognize, hey, there's something more going on here. And I think it's very unfortunate that we've mistaken what is common for what is normal. For example, obesity is extremely common in this country. That doesn't make it normal. My oldest daughter and her husband recently toured some of the Baltic countries, and they spent some time in Sweden. And she got home, she said, Dad, I didn't see a single overweight person in Sweden. It's crazy. And if you look at video footage from the 1950s, when families were out on the beach taking home movies, you didn't see many people that were overweight walking by. Well, genetically, we're not really different than we were in the 1950s, but people are making very different choices about how they fuel their bodies and how they move them and what they do or don't do. And people have become accustomed to seeing a lot of overweight individuals around. And so we start to think that it's normal. And when it comes to aging, a lot of people start thinking that, well, the older you get, the more you lose your mind. Or
the more you can't do.
Yeah. And we joke about it. We say, oh, I had a senior moment. I had a brain fart. And everyone loses their keys from time to time.
I'm just going to say that.
So there are things that happen because we're distracted. But when someone loses the capacity to put things together and to figure out how to go from point A to point B, and their world is so limited, they could just do that one thing, and that is incredibly taxing. That should be a red flag to us that, hey, we're already into something, because again, the choices that lead to Alzheimer's can start in our 20s. The pathology can show up in the brain 10 or 20 years before outward symptoms are manifest. And when we first start seeing those symptoms, way too many of us are tossing it off as, well, you are getting older.
It's a senior moment.
Why is it, for example, that if you're in your 20s and you have certain health challenges, you go to the doctor and the doctor says, oh my gosh, we got to run some tests. We got to figure this out. And at some magical age, I have no idea when it is, it's like you've stepped over this threshold. You get to the doctor's office and you have some complaint of something, and he or she looks at you and says, well, you are getting older. And I think that increasingly that's like a slap in the face. Just because someone's getting older doesn't mean there aren't things we can do to optimize the system. I have an older car that my kids drive, and just because it's older doesn't mean that I neglect changing the oil and the fluids and keeping it up and maintaining the tires and the alignment. And it's still an old car, but I can do a lot if I don't give up on it. And we need to treat our bodies as well or better as we treat our cars.
Okay, so yes, I'm good with that. But there's a challenge that I see here, and I see Lisa meeting part of this challenge. And thank you, Lisa. You see 1,200 folks that are, a particular age. And so you get to see things across the spectrum. we work with our families, you know, we have aunts and uncles and parents and maybe siblings. So great. We see some of these red flags. What can we do about it? I mean, talk to us about having a conversation with somebody, or how do we address this, or can we just take care of ourselves and not worry about it?
We absolutely can address it. And there's a couple of key points here. One is that it's far easier to prepare and prevent than it is to repair and repent. And unfortunately, we live in a society that, as far as medicine goes, we're very reactive, we're very downstream, we treat symptoms instead of root causes, and we wait until we're sick to go see the doctor. So we have a sick care system. We don't promote wellness as much as we could. So I think people increasingly need to understand that the time to plant a tree is 20 years ago.
Got it.
And the next best time is right now. So too many people that I talk to say, well, I'm glad to know there's something that can be done if you start experiencing symptoms of cognitive decline. And even though there's not a cure for Alzheimer's disease, you can make an impact if you do some of the right things. I hope I never need you, but if I do, I'm glad to know that there's something out there. That's entirely the wrong message. I think the key takeaway for most people needs to be virtually everyone. In fact, I can confidently say in the over 500 treatment summaries that our medical director's written in just the last 2 years, I have yet to find a single person of any age that doesn't have at least a handful of underlying issues that, if unaddressed, 20, 30, 40 years down the road, they're going to be a very serious problem. So the time to take care of brain health is now. The time to improve metabolic health is now, and you can do something about that. But part of your question, Mark, was, well, what do we do if we notice challenges with ourselves or with a loved one?
Correct.
So let me just share a very brief case study of one of our clients, and I think it'll illustrate exactly what we do. Man came to us at 62 years of age. A couple years earlier, he was diagnosed by a neurologist with early onset Alzheimer's disease, which means he developed it prior to age 65. Earlier in his life, he was diagnosed as a genius by a psychologist. You know, we joke with people, oh, Mark, you're a genius. Well, this guy literally was. He was a brilliant engineer. I didn't say a word.
Okay.
No offense, but no. So this gentleman was a very, very talented engineer who ended up being forced into early retirement because he couldn't remember things. And he went to another neurologist, got a second opinion. And the experience with those doctors was kind of like being put into a boat, shoved out on a rough sea, and having the oars removed. Because essentially they said, well, we'll see you in 6 months and see if you're any worse. And he said, what do I need to do about this? And they said, you need to get yourself a good attorney and get things in line.
Well, I like
so they needed to come see me. Get your affairs in order because you're going to wind up in long-term care in the next few years. Well, to a guy that was 60 years old at the time, that's like a sucker punch to the gut. He was referred to our office by a mutual friend. And when he came to us, we did a lot of baseline testing to try to understand objectively what was going on. So we used a device that tracks eye movement 100 times a second. We did an eye tracking test. That's a window at how the brain functions. We did a balance test.
100 times a second?
Yes.
That's not a millisecond. What is that? 10 a second?
We'll let Bill figure that out. But we did a very broad panel of lab work. So in a traditional workup, you might do this much blood work. We did this much. And we were looking at nutrients and hormones and inflammatory markers and flags for neurotoxins. And what we found is that he had a lot of metabolic dysfunction. He had a lot of hormonal deficiencies. There were key nutrients that he was very deficient in. And he also had kind of this smoldering, just inflammatory response. And Alzheimer's and most diseases are, the immune system's revved up. It's a pro-inflammatory state. So we wrote a treatment summary that was about 75 pages long, basically the user manual to his body. And we combined that with a good health history and some cognitive testing. So we used a computer-based, academically verified cognitive test that found his memory score was in the 8th percentile. After 4 months of addressing nutrient deficiencies, hormonal deficiencies, and using medical devices in our brain therapy studio, most of which have been around for decades, and they're FDA-registered devices, they just don't get used in older adults. By using those devices and using this approach, 4 months later, his memory score was in the 91st percentile. And instead of getting his affairs in order, he and his wife had a lifelong dream of doing a mission for their church. And they're going at the end of the year.
Oh.
She's going to be able to retire. And they have plans to go because he's been able to maintain his cognitive functioning and even continue to improve it. So he's certainly not cured. In fact, he fell off the wagon with his diet at one point, and symptoms started to really ramp up again. His wife said, "You can't do that. You've got to eat in ways that fit your brain. You got to stick with this." But as long as he's maintained a higher functional level. And if you can do that with someone that's already impaired, imagine what you can do with someone that's not. I have clients who are business executives, as I mentioned earlier, and they're trying to protect their brains and keep them sharp. It's pretty common. We can improve their cognitive scores 20 or 30% in about 3 months.
Huh.
And we hear all the time from people, "Oh my gosh, I'm getting my work done so much faster. I can accomplish more in the day. I have more energy. I don't feel that sag in the late afternoon." And it's incredibly rewarding, and it's super fun to do that and see it consistently with people all across the US.
Well, again, I'm hearing two things as we go through that. There was something that you said that I think is fairly common. When you mentioned something, these are things that we do with younger people, not with older people. Well, the implication there is that we have a lot of folks going, "Yeah, you're older. Okay. It's not that big a deal. It's normal." I think that's what Lisa fights on a daily basis is, yeah, it's not normal. No, you're older, but so what?
Yeah.
There's stuff, one, that you could do, and two, that maybe you should be doing. So that was something that I heard in there, and I think that's accurate. I think that we get to a certain point and the people get concerned that we are warehousing older people. And there are times and places where we need a little help. I get that. But I'm not sure that, a wholesale warehouse of older people is the right model. But two, I understand. We need to start younger. We need to do better. However, at this point, they run into a lot of people who we can't walk backwards. So the question is, Lisa's seeing a lot of people. Are there things that she can do? Are there, when she sees that one thing, she's going, "Whoa, that's quite a deficit." How do you initiate a conversation? I know she'd be busy all day with conversations. I get that. Maybe not different from now, except the topic would be a little bit different.
Sure.
You talk to a lot of people.
I do. Yeah. Well, and I do recognize those things, right? Because not only have I worked at the senior center, but I've worked in the senior industry. So I see it, I recognize it. As a family, we're experiencing it right now. So it's hard for me because I see what's happening and I want to talk to the other people in the family for them to recognize it too, because they don't understand. They just think, oh, it's just them being men.
Well, this goes back to what's common and what
Exactly.
normal.
Yeah. They just think that that's just them being them. And I'm like, but it's not. There's something happening here and we're seeing a progression and we have to change our mindsets to be able to help them. Right. And so that happens at the center too, because I do see it. I can see a decline. I can see that, okay, things are shifting here with this person. So now we have to treat it differently. We need to, even though they're still active, they're still doing all the things, you can tell that the mind is just not quite there anymore. So we maybe need to redirect differently or talk to them differently. So I do see it. And it's hard, but at the same time, I try to educate my staff to say, okay, here's what I'm seeing. So let's talk about this person now and what we need to be doing as a staff to help that person. Just because, we don't want them to feel less than, we don't want them to feel bad because these things are happening. We just want to help them through it and encourage them. Hey, you should go do this and you should go do that. And have you tried the fit and fall class? Have you tried chair volleyball? Oh my gosh, they love chair volleyball.
Chair volleyball.
We have a net, we have chairs, we have a big beach ball. And
I can see somebody getting hurt doing that.
No, they have to stay in their chair.
Okay.
Because somebody did get hurt.
Yeah.
So they have to stay in their chair. And then we have volunteers that come in and chase the ball because I don't want them up, grabbing the ball and things like that. But they love chair volleyball. It's something new. It's something stimulating for them. They have to think quickly on their, because
hand-eye coordination too.
Yeah. So I do see where things like that happen. But what would be awesome is if, maybe we had a better training for our staff as they see those things. And I have no problem having that conversation with a loved one because sometimes those loved ones don't see it. They're not as active as they probably should be. So I have to have those calls with them and say, hey, I've noticed these things happening. I don't know if you've noticed it, but we're getting a little concerned. I'm not sure that mom's going to be able to come by herself anymore, and things like that. And those are hard conversations to have to a loved one that is, for the most part, in denial.
And I think part of that denial is really important to understand because when someone is living in the home, that they, especially if they've been there for a long time, they have their own little routine. And there's a lot of muscle memory that just guides them through the day and their routine is their crutch. And so from a family's perspective, often people seem to be doing okay because they're not recognizing them in a different situation when things are different and challenging and new. And you do see that. And it's kind of like when your children are growing up. I think we've probably all had an experience if we've raised kids of not noticing how much they're changing from day to day. But boy, you leave town for a week on a business trip and you come back and you look at them and you think, who are you? When did you grow that inch? Things stand out. Or we've seen maybe nieces and nephews where it's like you haven't seen them for 6 months and you recognize the change. Someone in your shoes as a professional who is seeing people not all day, every day, but on a sporadic basis is more likely to see certain changes than a family is. And so your perspective becomes really valuable to that family. They just may not understand that yet.
Yeah, they don't see that. Yeah.
Well, so it was 10 minutes ago that I asked this question. And we
fail to answer?
We went this way and covered tremendous stuff. That isn't the deal, but I used to do litigation and have to bring it back. So
bring it
back. All right.
So you're going to lead the witness here.
Well, a little bit. Yeah, a little bit. Well, the thing is, Lisa sees more folks than we do. In my practice, I see quite a few folks. The question that is bothering me is the responsibility that we have to engage a person that we're going, well, they need a little bit of help. And to initiate that conversation, and is there a way that makes that meaningful enough that family goes, oh yeah, okay, because if they're not seeing it, it's going to be hard for them to process the conversation. is there a way to have this conversation that maybe, here's a legal term, more likely than not, get them to move along just a little bit in a direction where they can find some help?
Yeah, it's a really important question. And I'm sure Lisa has some insight because you have been a senior professional for so long. And I have some ideas as well. I know you have limited time. Should we have Lisa take a stab at it and I'll weigh in as well? Or
Yeah.
what do you think?
So are you asking about having that conversation with the family or with the person, the individual themselves?
Why, yes, I am.
You both. Okay. So for me, like I said, I have no problem engaging with a family member. I don't want to alert and make that, if it's like one of my members, I don't want to put them on, what are you, I would love to have that conversation with the family. Here's what I'm seeing. Here's what I'm, and I'll invite them, come have lunch with them and kind of see the difference in a setting that's not routine, that's not, come see how things are, how they're reacting and engaging differently than what they would be at home, where it's the same phone call, the same, they wake up in the morning, these are the things that they do, whereas they come to the center and it's not always like that. We have different music, we have an activity going on, and so so you just have to be I just have to watch them. I have to make sure. So I don't know that I necessarily engage the person that I'm seeing, but I will call the family because we have family contact information just for safety reasons. And so I'll call and have a conversation with them and just say, hey, just want to bring this to your attention. And sometimes they'll be like, oh my gosh, I had no idea. Sometimes they'll be like, okay, whatever, because or sometimes they'll be like, what do we do? How do we fix this? What's the next steps? And then that's where I can help with resources and things like that and say, you might want to try this or try that. So, so I think having those conversations are very important. But like I said, I don't normally have it unless they bring it to me. Lisa, I've noticed these things, and I'll have a conversation with them about that as well. So, but usually it's a family member that I'll reach out to. And I've had family members who are in denial, right? And they'll bring their loved one that is they should not be there alone. And like one lady, which I do it every time because I don't want her to feel bad. She's been a new member at the center because I introduce them every day at lunch, at least 10 times, but that's okay. Right. And everybody loves her and claps for her every time because they know, but there came a point where I had to tell her daughter, you have to be here with her because she wanders around and tries to leave the door looking, and I said, you have to be here with her. She can't be alone anymore. We love to have her here. We love her being a part of it, but she has to have someone here with her. So I have those conversations all the time. And it's okay. But, I have to protect that member and I have to protect my staff because I don't want any of them to feel bad if something happens. So yeah, I have those conversations all the time.
So Eric, we're gonna lose Lisa in just a few minutes. So you get up and leave when you need to.
Thank you.
Can't promise we won't talk about you.
I know. I'll watch later to see what you say.
Good. So Eric, I'm sitting at home. Lisa calls me and she goes, here's something that I'm seeing. I know there's spectrum of reactions to this, but probably falls in line kind of with oh my gosh, this is horrible. This is the end. We need to put her in memory care. We need to get her in a situation. The other end of this is not quite sure that Lisa's correct. They're not buying that she, that mom is there. And others just don't care. So I mean, and then there's the variations along the way. So let's talk about the ones that might be most inclined to pick up on this and then go, oh, what do we do? First reaction might be panic, freak it out a little bit. Do they have to? Is this something that they need to react that strongly about?
I don't think so at all. And I think the thing that makes the conversation easier is to approach it from the standpoint of, here's what I'm observing, and let's talk about what can be done. When things are dropped in a family's lap as, well, you got a problem here, but you don't have anything to offer in terms of solutions, that's when people tend to bristle and pull back and get frustrated, or not recognize the gravity of the situation. But when you call with, hey, I'm seeing these things, and I think there are some things that could be very helpful here, and I'd like to have a conversation about what might help, I find that people are much more open to that.
Got it.
And it's different than what they're getting in a lot of settings. I have a lot of physician friends who are very frustrated with the fact that in their organizations, they have extremely limited time to sit with a patient. And many of these doctor friends have the biggest hearts imaginable. And it kills them that they barely have time to look at their old med list and decide, are we going to renew this prescription or not? And they're out of time and they have to be on to the next patient. And they can't really sit there and even just grieve with the family. When there's loss, there's grief. And when you're talking about something that a person is losing, just to sit and allow a family to process is really valuable. And that often doesn't happen in our current medical model.
Oh, I was complaining about this yesterday, where you feel almost processed at the doctor's office. This will happen, and this will happen, this will happen, and then bing, the bell goes, and the doctor comes in, and he's got 5 minutes tops.
Right. So to start from a position that we're talking about a person here. This is not a number. This is not an object that we're talking about. This is a human being with a whole life wrapped up in this. And if we begin the conversation from that perspective, we get a little bit further. When we bring it from the standpoint of there are things that can be done, and let's talk about solutions, people are more open to it. When it comes to the actual solutions, there's two sides of it. And for many years, I only understood 50% of that side. There's the art side, and there's the science side. The art side is how we interact with people effectively, how we create environments that set them up for success. And we have to understand what's going on internally that's showing up outwardly as behavior to learn how to be helpful and responsive to that. The other side, though, the science side, comes from the standpoint of whatever you're seeing outwardly is a reflection of what's going on internally in the physical system. And the brain is part of this whole system of systems that we call the human body. And if we can understand root cause issues, the things that are affecting a person's cognitive functioning, and if we can deal with those and help them do just a little bit better, they have a lot more good days and their cognitive range can improve. And I wish I could sit here and say, oh, there's a cure for Alzheimer's disease. I sincerely believe that it's largely preventable. But for someone that already has issues, I think it's wrong these days to sit back and say, there's nothing we can do. I could tell you at least 50 things that we can look at and do.
Well, and I guess that's my point is for family, and I appreciate the way that you're approaching this, and that is, hey, we got some things going on. We get that. But this is the wrong time to panic. I'll let you know when to panic, but it's not right now. But as we go along, if we get to that point, I'll disclose that it's time to do that with you.
Let me give you an analogy of where I think families are in this situation and where most of the healthcare profession is and where I think it needs to change. Imagine that you're on an airplane. I do a lot of flying as I travel. And just imagine that you have the horrific experience that one of the engines catches on fire and the plane tilts forward and you're on a sharp trajectory headed for the ground. You're not going to make it to the runway. That is kind of what happens when people have the kind of metabolic mayhem and other problems that are occurring. And healthcare,
you can bend over.
Yeah.
that's what you can do.
Well, I think it's even worse than that, because for years when I was running assisted living and memory care communities, in retrospect, it's kind of like we were the flight attendants on that flight. And we were just running around delivering milk and cookies, acting as if nothing's wrong, knowing darn well that we're headed straight for the ground. And this is a nasty trajectory that we're on. But if we can leverage
you that fly a lot, those plane, I sat next to a pilot one time. I said, so if we didn't have engines, do we just drop like a rock? And he goes, oh no, you got a pretty good flight path, just so you know. All right. I didn't want anybody walking out of here going. He said, no, actually, we'll find a spot and we'll bring it down. Now, he may have just been, easing my mind, but I've seen some other things. They don't drop quite like a rock. Just
right.
Okay. I like the analogy, though. I'm just saying.
So that's comforting, and I'm glad to know that. Keep that in mind next week when I'm flying to North Dakota. But
that isn't the worst part about flying to North Dakota. I'm just saying, those of us in the room from Montana, we're just
Bismarck does get a little bit cold.
Oh,
and I
my
got to go to
goodness
Fargo,
gracious.
so it's going to be probably colder. But when we look at that trajectory differently, if there's a way that we can at least extinguish the flames, pull up on the stick and change the trajectory, we're never going to stop people from getting to the end of life. That's part of the experience here. But if we can change the trajectory and help people have a higher quality of experience and maybe have a nice glide slope to the runway, they'll still get to the runway, but it will be a much less harrowing experience. And we see all the time, we partner with assisted living facilities that license our protocol, and we get to see what happens for people already severely impaired. I'll give you a quick example. There's a woman living in a facility that we work with in Richland, Washington. She's 100 years old. She's been a mechanical lift transfer for a decade. So they use a device to pick her up out of bed and move her because she's that immobile. Just by adding some of the right medical devices that calm inflammation and improve blood flow and get more oxygen to her brain, within about 2 months of using those interventions in this facility, she was able to walk 75 feet with a walker and a one-person assist. Now, she is still significantly demented, but now she's walking. So staff levels have improved 100% because instead of 2 people to operate the lift, you got the one-person standby. So that's a win for the facility. When it comes to her quality of life, now her bowels have a chance of working better because gravity does its job while she's walking around. So that's going to alleviate some pain and some discomfort. And now she has the dignity of having enough core strength and capacity. She can sit on the edge of her bed and participate in the dressing process instead of lying there like a Barbie doll and having somebody dressing her. So even though there's not a cure for her, we've changed the trajectory and her quality of life is tremendously improved. We have other residents in that same facility that didn't recognize their family members, and now they call them by name. And they're still highly confused, but they know their families. And instead of sitting and hardly interacting, I got video a few months ago from the director of that facility showing one of these women dancing with her husband, and she now knows him by name, and they dance, and she still needs full-time residential care. But we changed the trajectory.
Oh yeah, that experience in and of itself is huge. So again, so as you talk, I'm sitting there, I'm listening. I'm trying to translate it so that I understand, but I am also sitting there going, well, okay, so what can we tell people? And the analogies that we can change that trajectory. We're not going to just spiral into the ground. We can change that. But by golly, the longer that you can remember your husband, well, that's huge. That's huge. And that's not just a change in the trajectory. It's a course direction change. And it's got to be huge for a family. Yeah, you may sit with her and she may ask you, the same question a few times, but the fact that she knows your husband, because I've seen those situations. So if we were putting this out to people, and if they were paying attention, and if they were going to say, okay, I hear what he's saying, certainly there's contacting you, and we'll talk about that in just a minute, kind of dig into that a little bit. You and I have talked about Dr. Dale Bredesen, who was kind of at the forefront of looking at this, going, wait. Our present medical system and pharmacological system sees things in a different way, but I'm not sure that's right. And he's done a lot of work with this. And so we'll come back to that.
Okay.
But if we were maybe to break this down for folks, we've talked about a number of things, but I don't know, do you have like a quick 5 that, you could tell people, okay, all right, if you don't listen to me, that's fine, but do these 5 things.
Yeah.
What would those be?
Absolutely. I would use an acronym, BEDS. These are largely things that you can do at home to protect and improve brain health. It's not going to patch all the holes. So think of brain health as like a boat. And when there are problems and that boat starts sinking, almost always there's not just one hole. There might be 20 holes in the boat. And if you go measure 1 or 2 and you think, oh, yeah, there's a deficiency there. If you plug that, you still have a leaky boat, which has caused many people to think, oh, yeah, fixing magnesium, that doesn't help brain health. Well, yeah, if that's all that you do, I totally agree. But there's plenty of research showing that, yeah, magnesium is essential for the heart and for the brain.
Well, I was going to say,
it's one hole in the boat.
Yeah, and this is not just about the brain.
Right. It's the whole system.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the boat it's the human body. If you have poor gut health, you have poor brain health, because the gut and the brain communicate constantly through the vagus nerve. So what can people do at home without blood work, without professional intervention? BEDS is an acronym we use in our coaching to remind people, number 1, focus on brain training. And I would define brain training as novel cognitive experience, something that's new. That could be everything from you travel to a new town, you use your GPS to get to the hotel once, and then you practice navigating without it. You try to build new mental maps.
Okay, except not in Paris. Okay, don't do that in Paris or London.
Or London. London would be the worst.
Mexico City is the worst. I was there as a kid, and I was completely overwhelmed. I come from this little town in eastern Montana. There's 4,500 people, and we went into Mexico City, and I was like,
but
so maybe
London cabbies have the parts of the brain that deal with mental maps. They're more robust in those London cabbies. That's been studied. So
I don't doubt that for a minute. Okay,
but
so
not new experience. So it could be as simple as brush your teeth with your non-dominant hand or eat with your non-dominant hand. Things like Brain HQ or Lumosity that more and more neurologists helping people with brain injury recoveries are using, because those computer programs measure where you are, and they continually give you something new and different to challenge you in new ways, which is different than doing this New York Times crossword every day.
Yeah. So something I'm hearing here is comfort zone. And almost anything that pushes you out of the comfort zone will challenge you. And then it means you're doing something different, something novel. Some people love it, I know, but other people, that's part of the comfort zone. I can't go out of that. And what I'm hearing you say is, so what about the comfort zone? Get out there, do it.
Yeah. So that's B, brain training. E would be exercise. If it's modest exercise like walking, then you want to get 60 minutes a day, hopefully 6 days a week. If it's more intensive, then 30 minutes a day might suffice. A lot of people say, well, should I focus on cardio? Should I focus on strength training? There are benefits to both, but as far as things like improving insulin sensitivity and improving brain health, weight training is actually more effective than cardio. Cardio helps us get a lot of good oxygen-rich blood to the brain. It improves heart health, and it's an important component. So I would encourage people to do some of each. And a lot of
every day. So some of each
every
every
day.
day. Okay.
Or alternate days. I'm a big fan of getting out. I love to run, so I'll run a few miles one day, but I'll do some weight training the next day, and I'll alternate. A thing that's hard for a lot of people, though, is if they hate to go to the gym or they hate exercise, it's important to recognize that you can engage in random acts of fitness, which also helps overcome the hurdle of, well, I don't have enough time.
Yeah.
So that's like, well, I park my car in the furthest parking spot and I walk briskly to the building. I take the stairs every opportunity that I get. I periodically get up and I do some chair stands up and down. Or I find things that I enjoy doing that are physically active. For example, in our business at A Mind for All Seasons, we do brain health boot camps and often have people from other parts of the country come out. A couple of months ago, I had a lady from the Southeast US come out with her daughter, and they arrived on a Saturday so that they could be ready for our boot camp that was Monday through Friday. And there was a festival going on at the Expo Center here just down the street. And her daughter took her mom to that expo, and they spent hours walking around. And she said, you know, Mom got more steps that day than she had had in the last 2 weeks. She has a hard time getting Mom to exercise, but Mom's social, she loved the event. And so daughter realized, oh, we just need to go to the mall and walk around and talk to people or shop or go to a festival or something. So when you compare, when you pair something that you love with physical movement, you get further. So
Which also seems to me that join a walking group, get together with the gals in the neighborhood and go out and walk. One that I would recommend with some caution is to get a dog. Our dog whines if we're not out the door,
or if the fireworks are going off, right?
The fireworks, oh my gosh. Anyhow, so get your group, get out, walk, talk,
So we talked about brain training.
Yeah.
We talked about exercise. The D in BEDS reminds us that diet is huge. Alzheimer's disease is nicknamed diabetes of the brain, or type 3 diabetes, because in about 80% of cases, there's a massive insulin resistance in the brain. And if someone is significantly resistant to insulin signaling, they have a hard time getting glucose into the cells so that the mitochondria can produce energy, then they tend to crave sugar because the signaling is, oh my gosh, give us some fuel. But just as if you had a car out of gas and it was surrounded by cans of gas, you might walk up and say, looks like you got plenty of gas here. If the driver said, I broke the spout, how do I get it in the tank? I have no spout. That's somewhat analogous to how insulin resistance would work. And if you're resistant to that signaling and you can't get the gas in the tank, then you have elevated sugars, which is going to damage tissues of the body. Your average sugar is the very best predictor of heart attack and stroke risk because elevated sugar is so damaging. So for people like that, who've been eating the standard American diet for years, reducing carbohydrate intake, being thoughtful about when they're not eating and giving the body times to not have to produce the insulin is important. And some people do better when they're burning fat for fuel. So sometimes we even have to use a ketogenic diet for a period of time with people to kind of hit the metabolic switch in a different direction, and then figure out what's going to be sustainable and healthy long-term once we reestablish some metabolic health. So what a lot of people can agree with as far as diet is processed food is a disaster, and we've got to control sugars, whatever we do. And that can involve some physical activity, but we especially have to be thoughtful of what we're putting in the body. So we could talk the entire rest of the day about diet, and we have limited time. So I'll kind of leave it there, but people need to be thoughtful about what they're eating. If we go,
By the way, just as a by the way, as folks get a little older and they're living on their own, that bowl of sugar puffs, they're not even sugar puffs anymore, the honey smacks,
whatever you call it. Yeah.
That is very attractive, right?
It
It's
is.
quick.
It's easy, but it's not real food.
Although I got to tell you, I had oatmeal this morning with raisins. It's one of our routines.
Yeah.
So
Here's the thing about that. People ask me all the time, well, okay, what should I eat? Well, how are you running the engine? What's your goal?
Yeah.
What are you trying to accomplish? Insulin is our hormone of growth and storage. And if your goal is to lose weight, you're not going to get there by flipping the insulin switch. So not to be picky here, but even though
what's wrong with
oatmeal is a better choice than sugar smacks or whatever, it still prompts a significant insulin response. So having the scrambled eggs and avocado for breakfast would not prompt near as much of an insulin response. So if you keep the insulin switch down,
can you put bacon with that?
well, we can have a discussion about that because there are opinions all over the board about that. And I think you got to be a little bit careful, but in the short run, yeah, having the bacon is not going to prompt as much of an insulin response as having the oatmeal. So my son, who runs cross country and track and recently did a half marathon in an hour and 22 minutes without a whole lot of training for that, just went out and did it. He needs to fuel his body very differently than an 80-year-old that's been sedentary for the last 50 years and needs to lose 300 pounds. That's a totally different situation. So as long as we're
running out of time. So, and I know you said we could go on diet forever.
So there's one more D.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
So quickly, the other D is dental health, and this is often overlooked. The bacteria that causes gum disease, P. gingivalis, can show up in the brains of a lot of Alzheimer's patients on autopsy. And most people don't realize how significant a role that plays in a chronic inflammatory response. Very quickly, I'll tell you about a client from Minnesota that came out. She was in her late 50s, had Parkinson's disease that had developed, and it was so bad she couldn't wipe her own bottom. She couldn't do her hair. She couldn't feed herself. She was dependent on her husband at that point. She came out and had a very thorough workup, including a cone beam CT scan, which is a different kind of imaging, looks more at the entire mouth and the soft tissues. And despite having a clean bill of health on most of her dental checkups and flossing and brushing every day, she had pockets of cavitations that were not showing up on regular x-rays, but they were there. And within a week, this sounds like it's impossible, but I have met this woman. I have seen this. Within a week of doing about $10,000 in dental work, she was able to walk up and down stairs, and she was wheelchair bound before that. Within about a month, she sent a text message to my business partner, our medical director, with her skipping down the boardwalk at a lake near her home, doing a 180 and skipping back up to the camera. Within a few months, she did a training or a meeting with our whole team, and she explained what had happened. And she was able to demonstrate doing jumping jacks. She now feeds herself. She can write. She can take care of her bathroom needs. She still has some residual symptoms, but she is so much better. And the biggest thing for her was dental health. So do not overlook that. The S's are sleep, which some people with their old Puritan leftover work ethic think sleep is for the weak. You sleep when you're dead. That's ridiculous. You have to sleep to be superior, because when we're sleeping, that's when the brain runs through its clean cycle and flushes out misfolded proteins and takes care of the health of our brain. And if there's a recent study that showed if you sleep less than 7 hours of night consistently, there's about a 50% bump in the amount of amyloid beta protein circulating in the brain. That's the stuff that forms the sticky plaques in the Alzheimer's brain. So sleep is essential. And if you haven't been screened for obstructive or central sleep apnea, get it done. Another S is stress management.
We talked a little bit about
Stress
that
is
earlier.
big deal. So got to manage stress. And the last S would be supplements, which are meant to be supplemental. Ideally, we get our nutrients from a good diet. But people ask me all the time, well, what supplement should I take? And I say, well, I don't know. It depends on what's in your blood work. Vitamin D3, for example, a lot of controversy about, do you need vitamin D? Do you not? There's a meta-analysis that shows some pretty interesting stuff about the value of D3. So people say, how much should I take? Well, I have some clients that take 1,000 IUs a day to maintain an optimal D3 level. And I have some that have to take 15,000 IUs because they've got a genetic issue that affects their absorption. So I can't tell you how much to take other than you got to measure and adjust it. And I think most multivitamins are a waste of money. Lots of supplements that you find that say, oh, this is going to improve your brain health. Well, it may have good ingredients that are in some degree involved in brain health, but that doesn't mean that you personally need all those things. I think there's value in measuring, and we see different results when we do that. So, beds. Yeah.
Now, can we get on your website and see something about beds? Do you have a little bit of write-up?
I think that's on one of the pages. I've got a chief technology officer that's put a lot of stuff on the website, and it's changing every day. And I think beds is on there, but there's a lot of information there.
Very good.
Yeah.
So Eric, we gotta shut it down. I know
It's been fun.
Yeah, and a lot of good information. Mind for All Seasons.
Yeah. amindforallseasons.com.
And we could go to Google and look and find that and find you. Thank you. Appreciate the time. And thanks to Lisa, who was here earlier. If you are over the, what did she say, 60 and over? I'm sure if you were 55 and wanted to fish, they'd let you out there at the Meridian Senior Center. Go on out. There's a lot of stuff going on, and it's good stuff to do.
One thing I'll just mention as we wrap up is a lot of people ask me, Eric, is there some way to learn more about this? Can I independently learn more? What should I do? Or how can I get help as a family caregiver? Is there something out there? And the answer is yes. Years ago, a couple of years ago now, I created a free resource for families called the Caregiver Minute. It's a daily video. It's 3 to 7 minutes. It's one tip, one idea, one strategy about how you take care of yourself as a caregiver, how you interact more effectively, how you work with others. And if people want to check that out, it takes first name and an email address. There's no advertising. There's no catch. There's no obligation. It's amindforallseasons.com/caregiver minute. You can sign up for free.
Good stuff too. Very good. Thank
you.
Enjoy. What a beautiful day. Enjoy it. We'll see you all back here in just a few minutes.